I'm sitting here behind two Ludwig Black Beauties, a modern one and a vintage model. And I explained in my last video how I have had this modern Black Beauty for many years and it's been one of my favorite drums. And I recently got this vintage one and was kind of sad to admit that it sounded better, I thought, than my newer Black Beauty. And someone in the comments very fairly pointed out, hey, it would have been nice if you had actually compared the two drums. So this is that follow-up video. And I have been accused of talking too much in the past, so I'm just gonna let you hear the two drums first, then we'll talk about the differences and let you do some back-to-back comparisons. Okay, so quick recap on the backstory. I've had this modern Black Beauty probably since 2017, 2018, and last year I was in the studio with a vintage Black Beauty and I loved it so much that I ended up buying one that was very, very similar. So this vintage one, this is an early 80s Keystone badge Ludwig Black Beauty, and there are some distinct and definite differences between these two drums. And I was mentioning in my last video that I liked this vintage one. I thought it sounded better than my modern one. There was a lot of speculation in the comments and theories about why that might be. So I want to just point out some of the obvious differences and then give my 2 cents on why I think they might sound different. Okay, so first of all, some similarities. These are both 6.5 by 14 inch black nickel over brass drums. They are 10 lug with triple flange hoops. Both have coated Remo Ambassador top heads and hazy ambassadors on the bottom. That's kind of where the similarities end, actually. There are quite a few differences between these two drums. Over the decades, the Black Beauty has shifted and has changed. One of the differences that was speculated was that because this is an early 80s, this vintage Black Beauty, that it might be bronze. I'd forgotten that this was a thing, that they switched over to using bronze for some of the Black Beauties around that era, and usually you can tell by there being a little BZ etching under the throw-off. I didn't find it, so I do think that this is brass, but that was one theory. Despite that, Ludwig's sourcing for the black nickel coating and for the brass itself, and then how the shells themselves are actually made, that has changed over the years. So even though these are both brass shells, they're different brass shells, and one shell to another, even manufactured the same way, will be slightly different. And then when you add in decades of slight manufacturing differences and sourcing differences over time, you're definitely gonna get two shells that are different. The hoops, while both triple flange, I believe are also different. The modern hoops are 2.3s, and just by feeling them, I believe that it's probably 1.6 millimeter hoops on the vintage Black Beauty. Another difference is that the modern Black Beauties have gaskets in between the lugs and the shell, whereas they do not on the vintage Black Beauties. And there's definitely been some speculation in the comments that maybe that's impeding the shell from properly resonating. The old ones sound better because they didn't have the gaskets. But the last, and in my opinion, probably the biggest difference between these two is that the vintage Black Beauty has the super sensitive throw-off system and there's a traditional throw-off on the modern Black Beauty. And honestly, that's the reason I didn't do the comparison in the last video. I just thought that it wasn't really apples to apples because the throw-off, that throw system makes such a big difference in my opinion. But surprisingly, I don't think anyone mentioned that. So let's compare these again back to back, and I've used the TuneBot to get these as close in pitch as I possibly can. So let's hear these two drums back to back. So after hearing that, some questions you might want to consider. Did they sound different to you? If they did, which one did you prefer, or did you think that maybe they were context dependent, that one would sound better in one situation, one might sound better in another? If you did think that one sounded better, why do you think that is? Based on all the differences we talked about before, what do you think is causing the biggest influence in the difference in sound between these two drums? Personally, I do feel like there's a difference, and to me, the modern Black Beauty sounds more drum-y, and the vintage Black Beauty sounds more snare-y, if that makes any sense. It's almost like there's the tone of the drum and then the sound of the snares with the modern Black Beauty, and they're more separate. And in the vintage Black Beauty, those two sounds are more together or cohesive somehow. I haven't listened back to the recording, but every time I put these two drums up on the drum set back to back, I prefer the sound of the vintage Black Beauty. I'm sad to say, because this has been a cherished drum for many years now, but I think it's been supplanted by the vintage Black Beauty at this point. Now, as far as what is causing these differences, I think that the hierarchy is probably that the difference in the snare system is making the biggest difference. I think probably the difference in hoops is making the next biggest difference. And then below all of that would be the difference in shell and the difference in, gaskets versus no gaskets on the lugs. But let's not forget that there's the difference in the blue and olive badge and the keystone badge. And of course, the badges themselves make a vast tonal difference that we want to take into account. Okay, so once again, I haven't heard the playback from these two drums, so I would love to get your opinions and your thoughts in the comments. So drop them below. Feel free to subscribe if you like. Thank you for watching. See you next time.